Emperor Hadrian, a name recognized by the friends and foes of Rome alike, from where the sun rose and the sun set across the known world. Often considered today as one of the 5 good emperors, Hadrian was nevertheless a complex, multifaceted, and relentlessly ambitious man who oversaw more than his fair share of wonderful, and more importantly nefarious deeds. He was said to be of incredible intelligence with an overwhelming love of Greek culture. In fact, he played a significant part in the fusion of Greco-Roman culture, which would last almost the entirety of the Roman Empire. He was acutely aware of the politics of his day and played the game well. He travelled across the world, became master of many skills, and applied the structure and discipline of the military to Rome's architects and workers to bring many great developments to the buildings and defences of ancient Rome. In the words of the anonymous author of the Epitome Caesaribus, he was mercurial, nuanced, and with many characters, as if born to control virtues and vices. Varius multiplex multiformis, advitia atque virtutes quasi arbiter genitus. And yet at the same time that same source said that he ingenium invidum trisce lascivum et ad ostentationem sui insolens calidete gebat, continentiam facilitatem clementiam simulans. He capably hid his jealous, depressive, and hedonistic mind for the better of his public image, simulating instead his restraint, friendliness, and mercy. So let's learn more about the man responsible for lasting monuments from England to Egypt, the codification of Roman law, and his tireless work towards peace throughout the empire, be it by leniency or by the darker side of his force. On the 9th day before the calends of February, when Vespasian was Roman emperor, Hadrian was born in either what's now Seville in modern Spain or in Rome itself. He came from an ancient Italian-Spanish family which traced itself back over 250 years and had been serving in the Senate for 5 generations. That privilege would explain why, at the age of just 10 years old when his parents died, he and his sister became the wards of the then praetor, future emperor Ulpius Trajanus, known to us as Trajan. He also happened to be his cousin. Under Trajan's guardianship, he began his official education and threw himself into Greek culture, in particular with a passion, earning the moniker Graeculus, Greekling. He consumed the studies and ways of the Athenians, Atheniensium studia moresque hausit, including rhetoric, singing, the harp, medicine, geometry, painting, and sculpting in both bronze and marble. At 15, he was enlisted in one of the Spanish legions, but ended up spending so much of his time going out hunting that Trajan soon recalled him to Rome. That was when Trajan started preparing Hadrian for future power. Hadrian received prestigious roles in the Roman judicial system and went on to serve as tribune of the 2nd Legion in Eastern Europe. Thereon, he was promoted into a new position in the Balkans towards the end of Domitian's emperorship. But at this time in his life, Hadrian was already showing signs of excess, indulging in pleasures, racking up debt, and more to the point, was already trying to conceal it. Trajan knew, of course, which meant Hadrian had to make every effort to impress him. Setting his sights on ultimate power, Hadrian devoted himself to mastery of both Latin speech-making and Roman politics. During this time, he served as Actorum Senatus Curator, responsible for recording everything said in the Senate. One source recounts that he had a memor supra quam cuiquam credibile est, a memory so brilliant that it would seem inconceivable to anyone, and he utilised his status as an intellectual powerhouse throughout his career. Hadrian was serving abroad when Nerva, the current emperor, who had already adopted Trajan as his son and heir, died. Realising his opportunity to curry more favour, Hadrian made haste, despite numerous obstacles along the way, to be the one to break the news to the new, unknowing Imperator. And so Hadrian was able to tell Trajan he was to be emperor. And his first reward for it? He was made quaestor, and not just any quaestor, the one with special duties to act as Trajan's mouthpiece to the Senate. Thanks to Hadrian's own practice, Trajan even entrusted him with writing the imperial speeches, who said study and note-taking were pointless. This intimacy with the emperor had definitively paid off, and he was now firmly in not only Trajan's good graces, but the empress Plotinus too, who may have gone so far as to arrange Hadrian's marriage to the emperor's niece, Vibia Sabina, a nice save from his earlier frolicking about. He then began to shine in truth, serving in the First Dacian War alongside Trajan, and then as tribune of the plebs in Rome, then more than successfully commanding a legion in the Second Dacian War. For his victories, Trajan gifted him a diamond that Nerva had in turn given him, a good omen of Hadrian's future prospects. It also meant that every time you go to Rome and see Trajan's famous column commemorating his victories in the Dacian Wars, you now know Hadrian had been there helping it happen. Moving on to the rank of praetor in Rome, then praetorian legate in Lower Pannonia, Hadrian racked up more and more success and goodwill. There he put down a Sarmatian revolt, revitalized the Roman legion's station there, and curbed the corruption of the local governors. This gained him the highest honour of his first consulship back at the capital. Plotina kept pushing him too, engineering his advancement to legate of the emperor in the Pantheon campaigns, and then to his second consulship. Behind the scenes, he was making waves in the social world too. No longer was he the little Greekling once mocked for having a rustic accent before his relentless drive to master Latin oratory. He was already tipped to be Trajan's heir, and he'd been cultivating friends of senatorial and equestrian rank. He'd also been taking note of those who'd wronged him. Through bribery, extortion, corruption, and courtship, Hadrian had friends in all the right places. So, it was during his time as governor of Syria, on the 5th day before the Ides of August, that he was officially adopted by Trajan, and became the heir to the Roman emperor. And just 2 days later, Trajan died, making Publius Aelius Hadrianus, Caesar Trajanus Hadrianus, Imperator, Emperor of Rome. That said, it wasn't necessarily a smooth handover. Rumours abounded as to who Trajan truly wanted to appoint. Hadrian had a dark side, which we'll come to more later, and other candidates were said to have been Trajan's preferred choices. It's possible that Plotina herself had ensured Hadrian rose above them, partly due to her own vision of Rome aligning with those of Hadrian. That meant that upon his ascendancy, Hadrian, though protected by his carefully curated network of supporters, not least Plotina, had many enemies in Rome. Cassius Dio reckoned that Hadrian was Hedus menenturin kai epenthetisavtor charis, a charming man to meet, appearing to possess a certain grace. This stands in contrast to what we heard earlier around the near sociopathic tendencies which brewed beneath, and despite his promise to serve the empire without harming the public interest or indeed any senator, and even philanthropotata arxas, ruling most benevolently, Cassius Dio quickly dispels this public front with another statement. Dia tinas phonus ariston andron, dia blether. He was greatly criticized through his murdering of some of the very best of men. The shadows that lurked beneath this new emperor's outward shining light took many to the underworld. For example, for their influence in the Senate, some of the first to go were the politicians Palma, Celsus, Nigrinus, and Lucius. In the intellectual sphere, as Hadrian pursued his studies, his love of distinction was insatiable. Philotimia aplesto echreto, and he hated anyone that might threaten him being the very best in all pursuits. He took down sophists in Rome, exiled or killed various architects who disagreed with him, and Cassius Dio went so far as to say that he was He was not only jealous of the living, but of the dead too, abolishing Homer, presumably because Hadrian could never be a better poet than him, and introduced the then little-known Antimachos, the epic poet who wrote the Thebais and Lide. Later grammarians would even rank him of skill next to Homer. Perhaps the enemies he made from deeds like this were what led to him becoming called the Restless Emperor, as he began his movements away from Rome and around the provinces. He pursued a policy of peace, cutting loose troublesome provinces, executing or exiling warmongering and jingoistic politicians. He actually ended up spending half his time as emperor outside Rome, from Campania to Gaul to Britain to Egypt to Spain, Germania to Parthia to Athens, Africa, back to Rome, and so on. Quisquam fere principum tantum terrarum tam celerite peragravit. Practically no other emperor moved across so much land with so much speed. He visited more legions than any previous emperor, and though he disciplined them strictly, ensured each had good access to necessary supplies like water. In this way, he could put down revolt after revolt, establish puppet kings, and consolidate power over an empire which had expanded to unprecedented bounds under Trajan. He poured money and monuments into the cities of the empire, examining each with his own eye carefully, choosing himself where to improve and how to improve them, paying attention to every slight detail. This played into his policy of peace, as enemies soon became aware that this was no bumbling fool leading Rome. This was a man who applied his computer-like brain to ensure there were no gaps in Rome's defences, either in terms of the military or just by the fact that its enemies would fear they'd end up overlooking something Hadrian never would. Of course, one of the most famous of these was the Great Wall he built, stretching across the north of England, marking Rome's border 15 Roman feet high and 80 Roman miles long, stationed by thousands of hardened legionaries and putting the fear of Jupiter into the barbarians of ancient Scotland. Athens was naturally another place he loved to visit. Before becoming emperor during his rise up the Cursus Honorum, Hadrian had been appointed Eponymos Archon, eponymous archon, the chief of civic affairs in Athens. Later he would return and was initiated into the very highest position within the Eleusinian mysteries, as well as presiding over the Dionysia festival and the Panhellenium Games, acting as chief archon of Athens. There he also completed the building of the Olympeum, the great temple of Zeus, and even added a statue of himself in there. I wonder why. And when in Rome, Hadrian didn't necessarily do as the Romans did. A minor example might be that he was the emperor who first set the trend of wearing a beard, protos genian katadixe. He was known to criticize those who rivaled him, but when someone we might consider a lesser citizen stuck up for themselves, he was quick to take a liking to them. One woman shouted at him that he should stop being emperor for not granting her request, and on the spot he turned around and granted her a hearing. He grew a dislike of the imperial palace on the Palatine and turned the massive villa he'd constructed as a retreat in Tibur into his new base of operations. It was huge and could house thousands, so even in Rome he'd govern, well, not really in Rome. This villa remains a UNESCO heritage site and is still an incredible sight to behold today. In his personal life, Hadrian's jealousies and brilliance burned together. Though he'd often show great favour to his friends, he paid attention to every rumour about them so much that they'd eventually all become his enemies. Remember, this is a man who could read a book once, and quickly at that, then recall it verbatim from memory. He didn't trust another to write his own biography, so he wrote it himself, and when it came to his wife Vibia Sabina, his attitude and deeds towards her were so vile that it said she killed herself rather than remain married to him. Only one person ever truly gained his unconditional love, the young Greek youth Antoninus. Originally introduced to Hadrian during his studies in Rome, he became the emperor's lover as a very young man, accompanying him across the known world from Athens to Libya. It was in Libya, in fact, that Antoninus was attacked by a Marusian lion. Hadrian, already known to be a keen hunter, and in fact statura procerus et habitudine robusta, tall and very strongly built. He often killed bears and lions himself, and this Marusian was no exception. He saved Antoninus' life and immortalized the event. And when Antoninus died, drowning in the Nile, Hadrian was distraught and dedicated much of his later life in deifying Antoninus across the empire. The emperor may well have groomed the young man in a rather unsavory way, but it's hard to say that anyone else made him care so deeply. Hadrian's legacy has, to put it lightly, been mixed. We know him to be considered one of the 5 good emperors, but my own take is that this is a fair bit too simplistic. Yes, he consolidated power and promoted peace across the empire, gifting many provinces by lavishing wealth and games on their peoples. but he was clearly a troubled if brilliant man. His deeds should not be forgiven, and in fact many around him did not forgive him. Cornelius Fronto, in his letters to Marcus Aurelius, said that he did not love Hadrian, but rather praised him ut Martem gradium ut ditem patrem, as he might Mars or Rex Infernus, a god of the underworld. Fronto said love requires confidence, and he lacked that in Hadrian. It was said that many hated him, and the Senate even tried to have all of his acts annulled. So for all that he left us marvellous monuments to Rome's greatness, such as his villa, the wall, his arches, even the rebuilding of Agrippa's Pantheon, I believe we should think about being too quick to promote the greatness of this emperor himself.